Hi everyone, this is Jono Bacon and welcome to another one of my videos as part of a series that I'm doing for the Open Org. They are a wonderful group of people and you can find out more information about them in the video description. And today I'm going to talk about 10 career tips. Now, there is a giant, thundering, rambunctious caveat to all of this, is that I'm 39. In fact, I've just turned 39. I don't claim to have all of the answers or even any of the answers. But I do believe that as you try new things in your career, as you branch out in different directions, you become older and you become a little bit wiser. And I'm confident that the things I'm going to share with you today are things that will add value. That for some of you, particularly if you're earlier in your career, will be reasonably useful. And even if you're a bit further along, they may be useful too. I'm not going to profess in any of these videos to be perfect. I'm as flawed a human being as anybody and possibly more flawed than many. I've made some good choices in my career. I've made some poor choices. But I think it's both the good choices and the poor choices that give us the experience so we can kind of see the patterns in the chaos and we can learn from it and we can make the best decisions moving forward. So without further ado, let's go over my 10 avoidable career mistakes, okay? Avoidable career mistake number 1, to take a job primarily because of the money and the package. Now, I think when you're younger, this can be very tempting. I'll always remember my first proper job that I took. I was a journalist after I left university, and I took a job at a place called Open Advantage, and they offered me this sum of money, which today wouldn't be considered a particularly large amount of money, but at the time was a massive chunk of dough for me. And I was very fortunate because it was a really fantastic place to work, and I worked with a great team that supported me and mentored me, and I learned a lot from them. But a lot of people will take the money and they'll take the package, right? They'll take the stock options and they'll take, you know, the package in terms of where you work and what you get and how you're supported and things like that. The most important thing is to find fit. Like, is this a good fit for you? As you get older in your career, or not necessarily older, as you progress through your career, it moves from being a job interview to being a conversation about what is the right kind of fit. Like, is this a good match for both the company and for you? And that is the most important thing. I would rather earn less money and be happier and be more challenged and be more focused in my career than take more money and be shoved in a cube where you can't have much of an influence or where you're not really learning or where you're not doing anything particularly interesting. So look at the money and look at the package and consider that. But bear in mind that, you know, if you're working somewhere, you're going to be there hopefully for a while and you want to be happy. You want to be able to get up in the morning and be motivated going to work. Because it doesn't matter how much money you're making. If you're miserable in your job, you're miserable, okay? So never ever just focus on the package or be too distracted by that. All right, avoidable mistake number 2, to only focus on the now. Now, there's a really fantastic book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by this guy called Stephen Covey. I recommend you all read it. It's a book that I honestly thought was one of these pointless kind of self-help personal development books that was, you know, cheesy and people walking on coals and all that nonsense. But it's actually a really, really fantastic book, and it started my interest and my following of Stoicism, which is a philosophy. And one of the things that Covey talks about in his book is you have this quadrant of things that are important and things that are urgent. And most of us focus on the important and the urgent things. Like, we have to respond to this email, I have to follow up with this person, I have to do this particular thing. But the opposite side of the quadrant, the opposite diagonal side of it, are things that are important but not urgent. And those are the most important things to think about. Like, what are the long-term goals that you want to focus on? So, you know, is that going to be writing a book, organizing an event? Is it going to be having a longer term piece of work that you want to focus on, starting a new project that you might not necessarily be able to complete immediately? So always think about those broader term goals in terms of your career and make a plan and stick to it. You know, one of my favorite people in the world is this guy called Rod Smallwood, who is the manager of Iron Maiden, and he said, when asked about how he pulls off these extravagant tours, I make a plan and I stick to it. So do that. Think about your career, where you are right now. It doesn't matter whether you're in a senior position in a company or whether you're working at McDonald's. Okay, think about where you want to get to and put those plans in place and go after them. Don't just think about, oh, I have to stick with what I'm doing right now and I have to just focus on, what's immediately around me and focusing on this email and everything else that distracts us, okay? Don't just live in the now. Focus on the broader long term. All right, avoidable mistake number 3 is to not challenge yourself. Now, we all fall into this at some point, okay? This is just human nature, okay? You get comfortable. Maybe you get to a point in your career and you've got a good job and you know everybody and, things are ticking over pretty well. I experienced this personally when I worked at Canonical. I really loved my job at Canonical. I was leading the Ubuntu community, at least at Canonical. I mean, the Ubuntu community probably differ about that, No one's specifically a leader. But anyway, I was in a position, I've been there for a long time, and I knew everybody. I had the job down. People seemed happy with what I was doing. Life was great. And I found myself about 5 or 6 years into that, enjoying it, but not feeling particularly challenged. It was challenging in some ways, but it wasn't in others. And what happens when you don't get challenged? You become lazy. And everybody says, I wouldn't become lazy. I'll be focused, but that's not true. Everybody gets lazy at some point. And sometimes it takes a while to kind of get out of that and to realize that you need to challenge yourself. I used to go to a personal trainer with my wife, and we met this wonderful human being called Ted, who runs a gym called Diablo Barbell in Concord, in California. And he said, if I can see room in your fitness regime, I'm going to take it. If I think you can take an extra pound or an extra 2 pounds, I'm going to take it. And that is exactly the right thing you should do. Is if you think there's scope for you to proceed and to do even more, then grab it. Don't just accept what you've got, right? So always try to push forward to the next challenge. Always try to lift more weight, to do better work, to improve your writing, to improve your presentation skills, to whatever it might be, but always keep on pushing. And that's how we get better. And then you also get the satisfaction of always accomplishing new things and seeing what you're possible of. What am I saying? It's been a long week and it's Monday. All right. Unavoidable mistake number 4. Don't just stick with the same crowd. Now, I'm saying this for a few different reasons. There are some people who I know who will only ever hang out with the same people. Now, a lot of my friends are into heavy metal. They'll only ever hang out with heavy metal people. A lot of my friends are developers. They'll only ever hang out with developers. A lot of my friends are executives. They'll only ever hang out with executives. And what they do is they get used to their little clique, and then sometimes they'll become either judgmental or gradually become uncomfortable with people in other groups. And I think this is a giant mistake. One of the things that I'm proud of in myself is that, I can go to an executive conference and hang out with people who are running companies and have a great time and learn a lot from them. But then I can go down the pub in my town and hang out with people who have got nothing to do with technology, have got nothing to do with what I do. They maybe, work in a restaurant nearby, or they maybe work for an insurance firm, or whatever they may do. It doesn't matter. I'm hanging out with them because I enjoy hanging out with them. One of the things I discovered when I moved to the US is that not all, but a lot of Americans can't go for very long without asking somebody what they do for a living. And I would go out with my friends, and my wife, who's American, would say, so, what do they do? I'd be like, I have no idea. Never came up. And it was just mind-blowing. And it's because the career element was not the most important thing. It's like I'm building a relationship with you. I'm getting to know you. And we have a connection in whatever it may be. It may be in the moment, but it may be more broad in terms of music or in terms of art or career or family or whatever it might be. So don't just stick with the same people. And one of the reasons why I say that is that I think some of our greatest lessons that we can learn are from people who've got absolutely nothing to do with what we do for our career in some capacity. Some of the greatest insights that I've learned have been from people who've got nothing to do what I do and don't work in the industries that I work in. So mix it up. All right. Unavoidable mistake, career mistake, number 5, okay? I should be saying what the mistake is. The mistake is burning bridges. So don't burn bridges, okay? Now, throughout the course of any career or any lifetime, you're going to meet people who are going to be fantastic and great fun and awesome to hang out with, and you're going to meet people who are difficult and frustrating and sometimes disrespectful or rude. And it can be tempting, particularly if you've got a bit of a hot-tempered personality. It can be difficult to think, you know what, F those people, okay? And I think that's a huge mistake. I think it's always good to, as an old colleague of mine, George Castro, would say, he'd always say, like, stay classy. And that was the mantra of the team that when I worked on with him at Canonical, is always stay classy. Now, that's not to say that you don't lose your temper, that you don't get frustrated, but keep that to yourself, okay? One of the best things you can do when you're frustrated is if you write an email up the way you're angry, is leave it until the morning and then reply then. Still see if you want to send it. Or before you're about to, amp up the warfare a little bit, go for a walk. Go and work out. Go and watch a TV show. But take a break. And in the majority of cases, you'll find that you don't necessarily want to do that. The reason why you shouldn't burn bridges is because you just don't know where people are going to end up working. And there is always going to be, in human societies, there's always going to be some people who are going to have a negative experience and they will carry it with them for the rest of their lives. So if you have a run-in with somebody and that person ends up getting into a position where they could be your boss or they could be a notable colleague or whatever it might be, why burn that bridge? Now, there is an obvious exception here, particularly in the culture that we're in today, of Me Too and things like that. That I'm not saying that you should just get on with people who are abusive or harassers or anything like that. Absolutely, you should speak up about that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about people who are kind of a bit difficult and annoying to work with. As a general rule, try not to burn a bridge, and definitely, again, with the exception of with more serious legal or harassment kind of situations, rage quitting a company I just don't think it's necessarily a great way to proceed. Each to their own. That's certainly not how I'd like to do it. All right, avoidable career mistake. I can't stick with my theme. Number 6, staying in your comfort zone. Now, this has got something to do with not challenging yourself. I'll always remember when I was at Canonical having dinner with Mark Shuttleworth one night, who founded Canonical, and one of the things that he said, I was coming up to about 7 years, and he said, I think when people get to about 7 years in their career, it's time for them to move on in a particular position. And I looked at him and said, you trying to tell me something? And he started giggling and said, no, I'm not talking about you. Okay. I don't think he was talking about me, but he makes, I think, a really good point. And that's that when you get to not necessarily 7 years, but a long time in the same position, with relative exceptions, it can be easy to get stuck in a comfort zone. It can be easy to get stuck in that rut that I talked about earlier on. And I think it's really important to completely jump out of that. Now, I remember when I left Canonical and I went to X Prize, that was a completely different leap for me. It wasn't really much to do with open source, with the exception of one of the prizes. It was a completely different environment, set of people. And it was a challenging experience, but it was a really rewarding experience. And I'm really glad that I did it, because what it did is it broke a seal. It broke something where I'd kind of got into this way of thinking. And I honestly thought I was kind of progressive in my thinking in terms of how I approached my career, and I realized I really wasn't. So it's always important to do that in some capacity. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be just with your career. That could be, if you keep going to the same locations on holiday, go somewhere different. It could be trying a new type of food or a new hobby, or if you don't like dancing, going and having dancing lessons, or if you're feeling comfortable about dancing, having dancing lessons. It doesn't matter what it is, just try and do something that gets you out of that comfort zone, because apart from the fact that it'll help you to think bigger, it will also just build your confidence in terms of trying things that are new, that may have nothing to do with that immediate scenario, but further down the line you'll be much more comfortable with. I remember when I first moved to the UK, I had a very uninteresting diet. I used to eat the same stuff over and over again. And my wife and her family are food connoisseurs. Like, they love food, okay? They love everything about it. And they would basically make me eat all kinds of random stuff. And I tried it, and I realized it was fine, and then, everything was fine. So I tried new things, and I explored new adventures, and that's the way to do it, okay? So don't just stay in your comfort zone. Get out of it. It will be really rewarding, if a bit terrifying at first. All right. Avoidable career mistake number 7, okay? This is giving in to imposter syndrome. Now, imposter syndrome is this situation where people get a job somewhere and they feel like they're really not very good, and that the people who are surrounding them don't know about it, and it's only a matter of time until they get found out about it. This is something that affects everybody, but it can be particularly difficult for underrepresented groups, people of color. I know any women who've suffered from this situation, where you are it's not just the imposter syndrome element, but you are a minority in a certain group of people. And it can be pretty crippling for a lot of people. I definitely had some of this when I joined Canonical and when I've joined other companies, where you do feel like a little bit out of your depth. And don't let it get to you. Focus on it and conquer it. And it can be conquered. There is no situation where you have to give in to that. There is no situation where there is, oh yeah, I'm definitely that person. Well, it's not imposter syndrome. I'm actually that terrible, and it's only a matter of time before I'm going to get found out. Well, think about the worst case scenario. If you are that terrible, you're going to get fired, or they're going to let you go. Well, you probably weren't the right person for that job anyway, so why stress it? What I would recommend you do is just get on with things. Don't let it get to you, and focus on doing a great job, learning, stretching yourself, growing. If anybody ever criticizes you because you're new at something or trying something new, or you're asking too many questions, well, screw them. They're in the wrong. We're all eternal students, and that's what we should be focusing on, is constantly growing and learning. And imposter syndrome really can hold people back. I'll always remember being in this bar in Mountain View. It was my first Ubuntu Developer Summit, and I was surrounded by some of the most well-respected technical Debian developers who I personally was a huge fan of. So I was a little bit starstruck, but I also felt completely out of my depth. Technically, I didn't know what they were talking about. But they were great. They welcomed me, and I asked a ton of questions, and I didn't let it get to me. And it's not the same for everybody, but I'm glad that I didn't let it get to me, and I'd encourage each of you to do the same thing as well. It can be conquered. You've just got to basically say, I'm not taking this bullshit from you, imposter syndrome. I'm going to get on with it. I'm going to make this work. Adversity manageable adversity is a really powerful tool for growth, The reason why I say manageable adversity is there are some types of adversity that aren't manageable. Like, sadly, there are some people who will treat people differently because of the color of their skin or their gender or their sexuality or whatever it might be. And in those situations where someone is treating you differently and it's clear and it's endemic, that's a problem, and it's very difficult to grow from that. But the kind of adversity where you're kind of thrown in at the deep end and you can succeed is one of the best things you can put yourself in a position to. It's the same theme that goes through my sixth one, which is getting out of your comfort zone, and my third one, which is challenging yourself. Like, conquer that adversity, conquer that imposter syndrome. All right, so how many fingers have I got? All right, number 8. Okay, avoidable career mistake number 8. Is that right? Yeah, I had to count my fingers there. Neglecting your family and your interests. This has always been something that's been of paramount importance to me personally. I love my wife, and I love my son. I love my family. I love my friends. I love my interests. And it's always been very, very important to me to really focus on getting good in my career and accomplishing the goals that I've set out to accomplish. But to make sure that I make time for my family and to make time for my son and to spend time with friends, to go out for beers with my buddies in the town that I live with, and to play music and go out to shows and go to restaurants and go out to dinner with my wife and things like that. I've met so many people over the years who have just let work get away with them. They're always on the road, and when they're not on the road, they're stressed, they bring it home. It causes problems with their family. And I always think about what I call my rocking chair moment. And what that is when you're like 80 or 90 years old, most of your friends have died because you've outlived them. Your family have passed away, and you just kind of sat there in your old folks' home. You sat there in your rocking chair, rocking backwards and forwards, and you're trying to think. You're thinking about your life and what you did. I don't think many people think to themselves at that point in their life, I wish I'd worked harder. No one thinks that. from what I understand. What they think is, I wish I'd spent more time with my family. I wish I pursued my interests more. I wish I traveled more. You know, I wish I'd been to that gig, or I wish I saw that movie when it came out, or, you know, I wish I'd done this particular thing that pops up. Nobody ever thinks, I wish I'd spent more time at the office, okay? But that's what we do. That's the important and the urgent thing that we tend to. So one thing I would encourage all of you to do is to sit down right now and think about your family and think about your hobbies and think about your friends and what you want to do outside of your career, because you're watching this video because it's probably got the word career in it. And like factor that in, and that means making choices and making compromises, and that's okay. Like, there has been many conferences, meetups, and events that I've not gone to because I want to spend time with my family, and I'm not afraid to say that. That's just the way it is. I devote an enormous part of my day to my career and to my clients, but. Am I going to miss Halloween? No. Am I going to miss birthdays? I'm going to try not to. Am I going to spend time in the holidays with my family? Absolutely. It's critical. All right. 9. That one. All right. Unavoidable career mistake number 9. We're getting into the to the tail end of this. Neglecting, again, the theme, neglecting your health or your fun side. I can't remember who said this, who this quote comes from, but you've only got one body, you know, make the most of it. So this is, take care of yourself. You know, I remember before I used to kick off the Ubuntu Developer Summits, I'd always say in the keynote about you know, getting some exercise and not drinking too much and eating better and eating well and stuff like that. And it's difficult to do at an event, and I give you that. But certainly when you're at home, and when you're on the road as well, get into a regime of exercising, get into a regime of eating well and taking care of yourself. Like, as an example, during the week for me, I try to exercise most days. I try to eat reasonably well during the week and healthily during the week. I limit the amount of coffee that I'll have a coffee in the morning, I'll have decaf for the rest of the day. Drink a lot of water. You've got to get yourself one of these things, right? Yeah, it's like a tank. Bong. Take care of yourself. And I tend to splurge at weekends. I'll go out and have drinks at weekends, and we'll get junk food or take out and have fun at the weekends. But take care of yourself. It will affect your happiness, your mental state. Like, exercise is unbelievable, not just for taking care of yourself, but reducing stress, for example. So really take care of yourself, but also your fun side. There are so many people who I've met and who I know who, as their careers kind of go up and up and up and up and up, is it that way? I don't know which way it is. Go up and up and up and up and up. They slowly become boring. They start speaking in much more formal, buzzwordy ways, and, you know, they don't go out with their friends as much, and they're not willing to let their vulnerable side or their sarcastic side come out as much, or their fun side. Don't let that happen to you. You can be well respected and accomplished in your career and be a fun person. In fact, the people who I respect the most, who have done so well in their career, are still really fun people to hang out with. They're people who are down to earth. Like, you know, this video is, you know, as part of the series for the Open Org. Like, the Open Org book was written by Jim Whitehurst. I have massive amount of respect for Jim because he's really accomplished in his career. I mean, the work that he did at Delta, that he's done at Red Hat, that he did as a consultant. But he's a really down-to-earth, friendly, genuine guy. And I admire that about him. So focus on your health, but focus on, like, you know, always look on the bright side of life. That's the way it should be. That's how Iron Maiden kind of end their shows, and that's how you should focus on your life as well. All right. This one, 10. Okay. Unavoidable career mistake number 10. Developing an ego. Do not develop an ego. This is my philosophy about this. If you're really good, other people will tell other people that you're good. Don't go out there and ramble on about how amazing you are and how insightful you are and how you have all of the answers and all that kind of stuff. I haven't come across too many people who have huge egos. It's kind of a bit of a stereotype that people in tech, for example, have got big egos, like Silicon Valley types. I actually think that's not particularly true. Most people I've met in tech have been really down to earth. There's definitely a few of them out there. And it's not just people who are in the executive positions. I've met various developers who've been like that and various community people who've been like that. And ego is something that we all have. Like, I've got an ego. You have. The person who sat behind you does. Yeah, there's someone behind you. We all have egos. But you just got to control it. And I think you've got to always know that you think you're better than you are and you think you're worse than you actually are. Okay? That's the way I tend to approach it. I remember when I started out my career, one of the things that was new to me in open source, this was back in the early 2000s, was a lot of people just had this massive ego and they talk about how great they were, particularly this was around that time I was hanging out with a lot of engineers. And I thought that it was okay. And I started developing a bit of an ego like that. And then I tried to rein it back. And now it bugs me. And I'm embarrassed that I got like that for a while. And some of you who I knew back then will probably remember it. I'm sorry. It's not to say that I don't have an ego right now. And I don't include promoting your work as having an ego. Like, look, I run my own business, right? Jono Bacon Consulting is me, and I'm not hiring anyone by design. So I need to maintain my reputation as someone who's good at what he does, I'd like to think. So you'll see on my social media accounts and videos like this of me talking about my ideas and the work that I do. I don't think that's having an ego. But you won't find me, I don't think, very often saying, I'm brilliant at this, and I'm the best person at this. I think I am good at some certain things, but you won't see me kind of like ramming it down people's throats. So have an ego, enough ego to give you confidence, to give you stature that you can do some really good stuff. But when you start chalking yourself up and talking about all the great stuff that you do and how you're a global expert on this, that, and the other, I think it's time to start evaluating about, maybe dialing it back. And always have a friend who is willing to tell you when you've got an ego like that. Because it's all fixable. There is a friend of mine, I'm not going to say who she is, and I adore her. I think she's wonderful. And she developed a bit of an ego at one point. And I had a conversation with her. And one of the things I love about my relationship with her is that she one time, well, not one time, a couple of times, would tell me when I was acting in a way that I shouldn't have acted. Like, for example, I was at an event one time, and apparently I was being a bit kind of sharp with people. I was being a bit impatient with people, and she told me. And I realized that I was a bit jet-lagged. I'd just come off a week of a load of meetings. And she gave me some really valuable feedback, and I was able to fix it. And her and I have always had this kind of relationship. We don't talk to each other very often, but there's a lot of respect for each other. And I said to her, like, I think you're developing a little bit of an ego. And you know what she did? She took the feedback really well, and she fixed it, and she doesn't have it anymore. And you want to surround yourself with people like that. And the best way to do that is to go up to someone who you're friends with and say, I want you to tell me if I get like this. If you think that I'm developing too much of an ego, I want you to tell me, okay? And I encourage you all as well to tell me, because I want to practice what I preach. And again, I'm not perfect, but I absolutely do not want to to turn into that again. All right, that's it. There's my 10 things. So just in quick summary, number 1, don't take a job because of the money in the package. Number 2, don't just focus on the now. Focus on the long term, the important and the not urgent. Number 3, don't stop challenging yourself. Focus on growing and challenging and seeing what you can do. You can do so much more. Number 4, don't just mingle with the same people. Number 5, don't just burn bridges. Number 6, don't just stay in your comfort zone. Number 7, don't give in to imposter syndrome. Number 8, don't neglect your family and your interests. Number 9, don't neglect your health and your fun side. Number 10, don't develop an ego. All right, that's it. Peace out, everyone.